The community center stood like an old friend at the edge of Pine Street, its brick walls weathered but warm in the afternoon sun. Mike pulled his truck into the nearly empty parking lot, his work boots hitting the pavement with a familiar thud. At 38, his body carried the evidence of 15 years in construction: calloused hands, a slight limp from an old roof accident, and eyes that squinted from too many days under bright skies. He wasn't supposed to be here today. Saturday mornings were usually reserved for sleeping in, maybe catching up on bills or watching whatever game was on. But when Diane from the center had called about the broken storage shelves, something in her voice, that mixture of hope and desperation, had gotten to him. Just this once, he'd told himself, grabbing his toolbox. The center's main room buzzed with quiet activity. A few older folks played cards in the corner. 2 teenage boys shot baskets through a hoop mounted over a trash can. And near the window, a small girl sat alone, her head bent over a coloring book, the sunlight catching the tight coils of her hair. Mike nodded to Diane, who mouthed, "Thank you," dramatically from behind her desk, and headed toward the storage room. His arms were full: toolbox, wood planks, a coffee balanced precariously on top, when 3 of the pencils rolled off and clattered to the floor. Before he could set anything down, the little girl was there, scooping them up. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, with eyes that seemed too serious for her round face. "Thanks, kiddo," Mike said. She nodded, not quite meeting his gaze, and handed him the pencils one by one, as if each transfer required its own moment of consideration. "I'm Mike," he offered. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered, the word barely making it past her lips before she retreated back to her coloring station. Mike went about his work, measuring and cutting replacement shelves for the storage room. Every now and then, he'd glance up to find Lily watching him, her eyes darting away whenever he noticed. There was something familiar in that watchfulness, the careful assessment of an adult by a child who had learned not to expect much from grown-ups. He'd worn that look himself, once upon a time. Around noon, Diane brought him a sandwich and sat on an upturned bucket while he ate. "Thanks for coming in," she said. "We've been waiting on the city to fix these shelves for months." Mike shrugged. "No big deal." "I see you met our Lily." Diane's voice softened. "Sweet girl. Been coming. Here after school and most weekends since her mom passed. Going on 2 years now." Something tightened in Mike's chest. "She lives with her grandmother. Good woman, but getting on in years. Works 2 jobs just to keep them afloat." Mike nodded, thinking of his own son, Tyler, now 16 and living 3 states away with his ex-wife and her new husband. Their phone calls had grown shorter, the silences longer. Sometimes Mike wondered if Tyler remembered the dad who'd taught him to ride a bike, or just the one who'd missed his last 3 school plays because of work. "Does she always sit by herself like that?" he asked. Diane sighed. "Pretty much. Doesn't talk much to the other kids. Barely talks to adults at all, to be honest. You got more words out of her than most folks do in a week." After Diane left, Mike returned to his work, but his thoughts kept drifting to the quiet child by the window. When he accidentally knocked over his water bottle, splattering droplets across the floor, he looked up to find Lily standing in the doorway, holding out a paper towel. "Thanks," he said, genuinely surprised. "You're pretty helpful, you know that?" She shrugged one thin shoulder, the gesture somehow both childlike and ancient. "I like fixing things too," she said, her voice slightly stronger than before. "Yeah? What kind of things?" "My grandma's radio, and I put the legs back on my chair when they fell off." Mike raised his eyebrows, impressed. "Sounds like you've got a knack for it." The ghost of a smile touched her lips before vanishing, like sunlight, briefly breaking through clouds. "My dad fixed things," she said, and the past tense hung heavy in the air between them. Before Mike could find the right words, she'd slipped away again. Later, as he was packing up his tools, she approached once more, this time carrying her coloring book. Without a word, she showed him a page where she'd colored a house, not in the usual bright crayon colors, but in careful, realistic shades of brown and gray and dark green. "That's real good," Mike said, meaning it. "You've got an eye for detail." She nodded, seeming pleased. It's like the house in my old neighborhood. You don't live there anymore? We moved to Grandma's after. She didn't need to explain after what. It was blue, our house. But I don't have a blue crayon anymore. Mike finished gathering his things, his mind still on the little girl and her lost blue house. At the front desk, he settled up with Diane, who tried to press a small payment on him that he refused. Really, it's fine, he insisted. Community, service, and all that. As he headed for the door, he spotted Lily putting her coloring supplies into a worn backpack. On impulse, he detoured to a donation box he'd noticed earlier, filled with school supplies. After a quick word with Diane, he selected a pack of crayons complete with 3 shades of blue and walked over to Lily. "Hey there," he said, crouching down to her level. "Thought you might be able to use these for your next masterpiece." Her eyes widened as she took the pack, fingers tracing over the colors visible through the clear plastic. For a moment, she looked simply like what she was, a child, delighted by a small gift. "Thank you," she said, and this time she looked directly at him, her brown eyes clear and solemn. "You're welcome, Lily." Outside, the afternoon had cooled, autumn asserting itself in the crispness of the air. Mike sat in his truck for a long moment, key in the ignition but engine silent. His apartment waited across town, empty, quiet, walls still bare after 2 years on his own. His ex-wife had taken most of the furniture and all of the photos in the split. Sometimes he thought he should get around to decorating, but it never seemed worth the effort. He thought of Lily coloring alone by the window, of Tyler, who no longer answered his texts right away, of his own father who'd left when Mike was 12 and never looked back. With a sigh, Mike started the engine. He had a standing grocery run to make, bills to sort through, a game he'd planned to watch. But as he pulled away from the community center, he found himself already thinking about next weekend, wondering if the basketball hoop needed fixing, or maybe the wobbly table he'd noticed in the corner. Just to be useful, he told himself. Nothing more than that. But the image of Lily's careful smile stayed with him all the way home, like a light left on in an otherwise dark house. Over the next few Saturdays, the community center became a regular part of Ray's weekend routine. He told himself it was because the place was falling apart. There was always something that needed fixing, from sticky doors to flickering lights to chairs with wobbly legs. The truth was more complicated, though he wasn't ready to admit it, even to himself. The third weekend, he arrived to find Lily already in her usual spot by the window. This time, though, she looked up when he entered, her serious face brightening just slightly when she saw him. She didn't wave or call out, but her recognition was there, quiet as a whispered secret. "Back again?" Diane asked from behind the reception desk, not bothering to hide her smile. Ray shrugged, adjusting his tool belt. "Thought I'd take a look at that leaky sink in the kitchen." "Of course." Diane nodded, her knowing look making him uncomfortable. Purely practical reasons. By noon, he'd fixed the sink and was eyeing the crooked basketball hoop when he realized Lily had moved. No longer at her window seat, she was now sitting at a table just 10 feet from where he was working, her coloring book spread out before her. When he glanced her way, she kept her eyes firmly on her work, as if the coincidence of her new location was entirely unremarkable. Ray hid his smile and began adjusting the hoop. Every so often, he'd steal a glance at Lily, noting how her tongue poked out slightly when she concentrated, how carefully she stayed within the lines. The new crayons he'd given her were being put to good use. He could see blues and purples and greens where before she'd only had darker colors. When his stomach growled loudly enough for her to hear, Lily looked up with wide eyes. "Sounds like a bear," she said, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ray laughed. "Feels like one too. I forgot to bring lunch today." She studied him for a moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a slightly squashed sandwich, wrapped in wax paper. Breaking it in half, she extended one portion toward him. "Grandma always packs too much," she said. The simple gesture caught him off guard. He hesitated, then accepted the offering with the seriousness it deserved. "Thank you, Lily. That's mighty kind of you." They ate in companionable silence, Ray sitting on the floor near her table. The sandwich was peanut butter and banana, not his usual choice, but somehow perfect in the moment. "Your grandma makes a good sandwich," he said when they'd finished. Lily shook her head. "I made it. Grandma has to leave early for work." Something in Ray's chest tightened. He thought of his own son, Ben, now living with his ex-wife in another state. At 16, Ben could certainly make his own lunch, but the thought of this small girl preparing her meals alone each morning made Ray's heart ache. "Well, you've got sandwich-making skills, that's for sure," he said, keeping his tone light. The next weekend, Ray brought 2 brown paper bags, each containing a ham sandwich, apple slices, and cookies. When lunchtime came around, he casually placed 1 bag on Lily's table. "Thought I'd return the favor," he said with a shrug when she looked up questioningly. Her smile that day was like sunshine breaking through after a long rain. As October turned to November, their lunch routine solidified. Sometimes Ray brought the food, sometimes Lily shared hers. They didn't talk much at first, but gradually their silences grew comfortable, punctuated by Lily's observations about the other kids at the center, or Ray's stories about funny things that happened at construction sites. One Saturday, a fierce storm hit the city. Rain hammered against the community center's roof, finding all the weak spots. Ray spent the morning positioning buckets under drips and examining the ceiling for the worst leaks. By afternoon, most parents had picked up their children early, not wanting to drive in the worsening conditions. But Lily remained, occasionally glancing at the clock with growing worry. At 4:30, half an hour after her grandmother usually arrived, Diane's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she walked over to where Lily sat. "Your grandma called, honey. The streets near her work are flooded, and she's having trouble getting through. She might be another hour or so." Lily nodded bravely, but Ray saw her hands tighten around her crayon. "I've got to close up the front office for a bit to deal with the leak in the storage room," Diane said, looking at Ray. "Would you mind keeping an eye on things out here?" "No problem," Ray assured her, then turned to Lily once Diane had gone. "Looks like we're storm buddies for a while." The girl nodded, but her usual composure was slipping. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump. "Not a fan of storms?" Ray asked gently. She shook her head. "The lights went out once when it was just me at home. It was dark for a long time." Ray's heart squeezed. "That's tough. I don't like being alone in the dark either." For a moment, they listened to the rain pounding the roof. Then Ray had an idea. "Hey, I was about to start building that new bookshelf for the reading corner. Want to help?" Lily looked up, uncertainty and interest battling on her face. "I don't know how. I'll teach you. It's not hard, and I could use an assistant." Slowly, she nodded. In the corner of the main room, Ray laid out the pre-cut wood pieces and his tools. He showed Lily how to measure twice before marking, how to check if corners were square, how to hold the wood steady while he worked. To his surprise, she was a quick study, asking smart questions and remembering his instructions perfectly. When it came time to hammer in the first nail, he hesitated, then offered her the hammer. "Want to try? I'll help you." Her eyes widened. "What if I mess up?" "Then we fix it. That's how you learn." Cautiously, she took the hammer. It was nearly too heavy for her small hands, but she gripped it with determination. Ray helped her position the nail, then guided her hand through the first few taps until the nail caught. After that, she continued on her own, face scrunched in concentration as she delivered careful blows. When the nail was finally flush with the wood, she looked up at him with such triumph that Ray had to swallow hard against a sudden tightness in his throat. "Perfect job," he said. "You're a natural." As they continued working, Ray deliberately pretended to hit his thumb, shaking his hand and making an exaggerated face of pain. Lily's laughter, the first real laugh he'd heard from her, bubbled up, bright and surprising as a spring flower, pushing through snow. "You did that on purpose, you?" she accused, eyes dancing. "Maybe," he admitted with a wink, "but it was worth it to hear you laugh." By the time the bookshelf was assembled, The storm had lessened to a gentle rain. Through the windows they could see a car pull up, an older woman emerging slowly, leaning on an umbrella. "That's my grandma," Lily said, gathering her things quickly. At the door she paused and looked back at Ray. "Will you be here next Saturday?" "Count on it," he replied. As she hurried out to her grandmother's waiting arms, Lily turned one last time to wave, her smile small but real. Ray waved back, surprised by the warmth spreading through his chest. Later, driving home through the rain-washed streets, Ray found himself looking forward to next weekend in a way he hadn't anticipated. Anything in a long time, the empty apartment that awaited him didn't seem quite so empty anymore, filled as it was with thoughts of a small girl's laughter and the strange, unexpected feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he needed to be. The flyer caught Tom's eye as he walked into the community center one Saturday morning in early December. Pink and blue letters announced a father-daughter dance scheduled for the following weekend. Diane was taping it to the bulletin board, humming along to the Christmas music playing softly through the old speakers. "Getting festive in here," Tom commented, stamping snow from his boots. Diane turned with a smile. "About time, don't you think? We could all use some cheer." Tom nodded, his eyes still on the flyer. Something about those words, father-daughter dance, he stirred an uncomfortable feeling in his chest. He thought of his own daughter, Amber, now 15 and living with her mother in Seattle. Their last 3 scheduled phone calls had gone to voicemail. The court-mandated monthly visits had dwindled to twice a year at her request. "You all right?" Diane asked, noticing his expression. "Yeah, just thinking." He gestured toward the storage room. "Those new light fixtures came in. Should take me a couple hours to install them." As he worked, Tom found himself thinking about Lily. He'd been coming to the center every Saturday for nearly 3 months now. What had started as a one-time favor had somehow turned into the most meaningful part of his week. They had fallen into a comfortable routine. He would fix whatever needed fixing, she would color or read nearby, and they would share lunch together. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, but the silence between them was never awkward. He'd learned bits and pieces of her life during these conversations. How she was 8, almost 9, how she liked math but struggled with spelling, how her grandmother, Ms. Betty, worked as a hospital aide during the week and cleaned offices on weekends, how they had moved to their small apartment after Lily's mother died from what Lily only referred to as being sick for a long time. What she never mentioned was her father. Tom didn't ask. Around noon, he emerged from the storage room to find Lily in her usual spot, but something was different. She wasn't coloring or reading. Instead, she sat perfectly still, watching the teenage girls across the room excitedly discussing dresses and hairstyles for the upcoming dance. When she saw Tom, she quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed in a book. But he had caught the longing in her eyes, raw and painful to witness. He grabbed his lunch bag and joined her at the table, keeping his tone casual. "How's the book?" She shrugged. "It's okay." They ate in silence for a while, but Tom could feel her stealing glances at the dance flyer. He searched for something to say, some way to address what was clearly on her mind without making it worse. Before he could speak, Lily surprised him. "Are you helping with the decorations?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "For the dance thing?" Tom nodded. "Diane asked if I could hang some lights and streamers on Friday. Apparently the regular caretaker is out of town." "Oh." Lily picked at the crust of her sandwich. "It sounds nice." "I guess so." Tom felt suddenly uncomfortably aware of his role as just the handyman, just the weekend volunteer. He had no right to step into any other space in this child's life, no matter how much he might want to. After lunch, Lily was quieter than usual. She moved to the craft table where some of the other children were making paper snowflakes, but her heart didn't seem in it. Tom threw himself into his work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his own chest. By mid-afternoon, he was balancing on a ladder, fixing a stubborn ceiling tile, when he sensed someone watching him. Looking down, he saw Lily standing at the base of the ladder, her expression more serious than usual. "Careful," he warned. Not safe to stand under a ladder. She didn't move. Can I ask you something? Tom climbed down, dusting off his hands. Sure thing. What's up? Lily took a deep breath as if preparing for something monumentally difficult. Her hands twisted the hem of her sweater, and she stared fixedly at a point somewhere around Tom's. Knees, mister, she began, her voice so soft he had to lean down to hear her. Would you be my dad? Just for the dance? The question hit Tom like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't even think clearly. The hope and fear in those few simple words undid him completely. He crouched down to her level, trying to find the right response, aware that this moment mattered in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Lily, he said gently, I would be honored. The transformation of her face, from anxious tension to blooming joy, was like watching the sun rise. Her smile spread slowly, lighting her eyes from within, erasing the careful guardedness he'd grown accustomed to seeing there. Really? She whispered, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. Really? Tom confirmed, his own voice rough with emotion. But we should ask your grandmother first. Make sure it's okay with her. Lily nodded solemnly. She'll say yes. I told her about you, about how you fix things and don't talk too much and share your lunch. Tom laughed, surprised and touched that he had been a topic of conversation in their home. All good things, I hope. She says you're a decent sort, Lily reported with the air of delivering high praise. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Lily stayed close by as Tom finished his work, occasionally asking questions about the dance. Would there be cake? Should she wear her church shoes? Did he know how to dance? He answered as best he could, all while trying to process what he'd agreed to and what it might mean. As closing time approached, Lily grew increasingly excited about telling her grandmother. When Ms. Betty arrived, Tom felt unexpectedly nervous. He'd seen her from a distance over the weeks but had never actually spoken to her. She was a small woman, probably in her mid-60s, with the same warm brown skin and watchful eyes as her granddaughter. Despite her slight frame, she carried herself with dignity, her back straight despite what must have been a long day at work. Lily ran to her, tugging her hand. Grandma, come meet Mr. Tom. Ms. Betty approached with a measured gaze, taking his measure in a way that made Tom stand a little straighter. So you're the handyman Lily talks about, she said, her voice gentle but assessing. Yes, ma'am, Tom replied, extending his hand. Tom Bailey. She took it, her grip surprisingly firm. Betty Williams. My granddaughter seems quite taken with you. Before Tom could respond, Lily burst in with her news. Grandma, Mr. Tom said he would take me to the father-daughter dance. Can I go, please? Ms. Betty's eyebrows rose slightly as she looked from her hopeful granddaughter to Tom. Is that so? Tom felt heat rise in his face. If it's all right with you, of course. I understand if you'd rather not. No, Ms. Betty interrupted, her expression softening. It's fine, more than fine. She laid a gentle hand on Lily's head. This child has been too serious for too long. A dance might be just the thing. They exchanged phone numbers and agreed that Tom would pick Lily up at 6 the following Saturday. As they were leaving, Ms. Betty turned back. Thank you, she said simply. It means more than you know. That night, Tom sat in his quiet apartment staring at his phone. Before he could overthink it, he dialed his daughter's number, not really expecting her to answer. To his surprise, she did. Dad? Amber sounded confused. Everything okay? Everything's fine, he assured her quickly. Just wanted to hear your voice. There was a pause, then, oh, well, I'm kind of in the middle of something. That's okay, Tom said. He took a deep breath. I miss you, Amber. I know things have been difficult and I know I haven't always been the father you needed, but I'm trying to do better. The silence on the other end stretched out so long that Tom wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, her voice came back softer than before. I miss you too sometimes. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small crack in the wall between them. After they hung up, Tom found himself thinking about fatherhood, about the ways he'd failed, and the chance. He now had to get something right. Not as Lily's father, he had no illusions about that, but as someone who could show her that men could be reliable, could show up when they said they would, could care. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, heavy but not unwelcome. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt like he had a purpose beyond just getting through each day. As he got ready for bed, he realized he would need to buy a tie, and maybe flowers. Definitely flowers. The thought made him smile. A middle-aged construction worker nervous about a dance with an 8-year-old. But this wasn't just any dance, and Lily wasn't just any child. Somehow, in her quiet, careful way, she had worked her way into a corner of his heart he'd thought was permanently closed. Those simple words, "Would you be my dad?" had changed something fundamental, awakened possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider. Just for the dance, he reminded himself as he drifted off to sleep. Just for one night. But deep down, he knew better. Some doors once opened can never truly be closed again. The tie was giving Frank trouble. His fingers, more accustomed to handling hammers and wrenches than delicate fabric, fumbled with the knot for the third time. With a frustrated sigh, he gave up and opted for a clip-on from the back of his closet. Not ideal, but it would have to do. The small box containing a wrist corsage sat on his kitchen counter, a simple arrangement of baby's breath and a single pink rose that had cost more than he'd expected. The saleswoman had assured him it was perfect for a young girl attending her first dance. At 5:30, Frank checked his reflection one last time. The suit was old but still fit well enough. He'd polished his dress shoes until they shone, and had even splurged on a haircut the day before. He looked respectable. The thought made him smile wryly. It had been a long time since he'd cared about looking respectable. The drive to Lily's apartment took 15 minutes. He'd only been there once before when he'd dropped off a bag of school supplies that Diane had collected for her. The building was old but well-maintained, with window boxes showing the last fading flowers of fall. Frank's knock was answered by Ms. Betty, who smiled when she saw him. "Right on time," she said, opening the door wider. "Come in, Lily's almost ready. She's been getting dressed for nearly 2 hours." The apartment was small but immaculate, with furniture that had seen better days but was polished to a shine. Family. Photos lined the walls, many featuring a woman who must have been Lily's mother, her smile a mirror image of her daughter's. "You have a lovely home," Frank said, meaning it. Ms. Betty gestured for him to sit. "It's not much, but we make do." She studied him for a moment. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about this dance all week. I haven't seen her this excited since, well, in a very long time." Frank nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility in her words. "I'll make sure she has a good time. I know you will." Ms. Betty's voice softened. "You've been good for her." She smiles more now. Before Frank could respond, there was a sound from the hallway. They both turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, suddenly shy. She wore a simple blue dress with small white flowers embroidered along the hem. Her hair had been carefully styled into 2 neat puffs tied with matching blue ribbons. On her feet were shiny black patent leather shoes that looked new. "Well, don't you look beautiful?" Frank said, his voice catching unexpectedly. Lily's face lit up. "Really? Grandma helped me pick it out." "It's perfect," he assured her, then remembered the box in his hands. "I brought you something." Her eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal the corsage. "It's for your wrist," he explained. "Ladies, wear them to special dances." With careful movements, he slipped the elastic band over her small hand. The flowers looked bigger on her wrist than he'd anticipated, but her delighted expression was worth every penny. "I've never had flowers before," she whispered, touching the petals with gentle fingers. Ms. Betty discreetly wiped her eyes. "Let me get a picture of you two before you go." They posed awkwardly by the front door, Frank crouching slightly to be closer to Lily's height. Just before Ms. Betty took the photo with her old flip phone, Lily slipped her hand into Frank's. The simple gesture of trust nearly undid him. "Now you be good for Mr. Frank." Ms. Betty instructed as they prepared to leave. And remember your manners. Yes, Grandma, Lily promised solemnly. As they walked to the car, Lily looked up at Frank with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. I've never been to a dance before. That makes two of us, Frank admitted, helping her buckle her seatbelt. But I hear they're pretty fun. The community center had been transformed. Christmas lights hung from the ceiling in swooping patterns, casting a warm glow over the space. Paper snowflakes dangled from fishing line, turning gently in the air. A table along one wall held punch and cookies, while another displayed a simple photo backdrop with silver and blue streamers. Several fathers and daughters were already there, from tiny girls in frilly dresses to teenagers trying to look cool. Despite their obvious excitement, Diane greeted them at the door, her face breaking into a wide smile when she saw Lily. "Don't you look gorgeous?" she exclaimed. "And you clean up pretty well too, Frank," she added with a wink. Lily stayed close to Frank's side as they entered, her hand tightly gripping his. The DJ, really just one of the teenage volunteers with a laptop, started a new song, and several pairs moved to the dance floor. "Would you like some punch first?" Frank asked, sensing Lily's nervousness. She nodded gratefully, and they made their way to the refreshment table. As they sipped their drinks, Frank pointed out the decorations he had helped hang the day before. "See? Those big snowflakes? I had to use the really tall ladder for those," Lily smiled. "They're pretty, like they're floating." Gradually, her grip on his hand loosened as she took in the festivities around them. When a line dance started with the DJ calling out simple steps, her feet began to tap along with the music. "Want to try it?" Frank asked. She hesitated, then nodded determinedly. On the dance floor, Frank discovered that his construction work had not prepared him for coordinated movement. He stumbled through the steps, occasionally going left when everyone else went right. But Lily caught on quickly, her serious face breaking into giggles when Frank dramatically pretended to lose his balance. "You're silly," she informed him, with the air of someone making an important scientific observation. "Only on special occasions," he replied gravely. As the evening progressed, Lily blossomed. She joined a group of girls her age for an energetic dance contest, her initial shyness giving way to genuine enjoyment. Frank watched from the sidelines, a strange mixture of pride and wistfulness filling his chest. During a slow song, Lily returned to his side. "We're supposed to dance together for this one," she explained, holding out her hands expectantly. Carefully, Frank showed her how to stand on the tops of his shoes so he could guide them both around the floor. Her face turned serious with concentration, reminding him of how she looked when helping him measure wood for a project. "Am I doing it right?" she asked. "Perfect," he assured her. After the song ended, they took a break for cookies and more punch. Lily's cheeks were flushed with excitement, her earlier reservation completely gone. "This is the best night ever," she declared, cookie crumbs dotting the corners of her smile. Frank's chest tightened with a familiar ache, the bittersweet knowledge that this mattered more to both of them than either could properly express. Near the end of the evening, the DJ announced a special father-daughter photo opportunity. Lily looked up at Frank questioningly. "Would that be okay?" she asked, suddenly uncertain again. "Since you're not really—" "I'd be honored," Frank said quickly. "Unless you'd rather not?" She shook her head firmly. "I want to, for remembering." They stood together against the backdrop, Frank's hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. When the volunteer taking photos instructed them to say cheese, Lily's smile was so bright it seemed to illuminate the room. Afterward, as they waited for the photo to print, Lily grew quiet. "You okay?" Frank asked. She nodded, then hesitated. "I was just thinking about my mom. She would have liked you." Frank swallowed hard. "I'm sure I would have liked her too." "She got sick when I was little," Lily continued, her voice matter of fact, in the way children sometimes are about the most devastating things. "Grandma says she's watching over me from heaven." "I bet she is," Frank agreed softly. "And I bet she's very proud of you." When their photo was ready, Lily held it carefully as if it were made of something far more precious than paper. The drive back to Lily's apartment was quiet, the excitement of the evening giving way to peaceful exhaustion. By the time they arrived, Lily was fighting to keep her eyes open. Miss Betty was waiting for them. "Did you have a good time, baby?" Lily nodded sleepily. "The best time." Mr. Frank danced funny. Frank laughed. "That's putting it kindly." "Why don't you go get ready for bed?" Miss Betty suggested. "I'll be there in a minute to tuck you in." Lily hugged Frank's legs before heading down the hallway. "Thank you for being my dad tonight," she said simply, then disappeared into her room. Alone. With Miss Betty, Frank found himself unexpectedly emotional. "She's an amazing kid," he said. Miss Betty nodded. "She is, but she's been through a lot." She gestured for Frank to sit. "There's something I should tell you." The serious tone in her voice made Frank's stomach tighten with worry. "I've been having some health problems," Miss Betty said quietly. "Nothing immediate, but I'm getting older. The doctors are concerned about my heart." Frank listened as she explained her situation, the medications that were helping but not solving the problem, the recommendation that she reduce her working hours, her fears about providing for Lily. "I don't have anyone else," she admitted. "My son, Lily's father, hasn't been in the picture since before she was born. My daughter did everything on her own until she got sick. Now it's just me, and I worry about what would happen to Lily if—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Frank understood. "I'm not asking for anything," Miss Betty continued quickly. "But Lily has grown attached to you. You've become important to her. I just wanted you to know that." Frank nodded, a whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. "I care about her too," he said finally. "More than I expected to. I can see that." Miss Betty's smile was tired, but genuine. "And I'm grateful for it." As Frank drove home that night, his thoughts were a jumble of emotions and half-formed plans. The tie he had struggled with earlier now hung loosely around his neck, a reminder of the evening that had changed everything. He thought of his own failed marriage, of his strained relationship with his son, of all the ways he had messed up as a father the first time around. The idea of taking on any kind of parental role again should have terrified him. Instead, he found himself making mental notes about children's books Lily might enjoy, about whether the spare room in his apartment could be painted a cheerful color, about what it might mean to be present in a child's life in a way he hadn't managed before. It was too soon for any decisions, he reminded himself. Too soon for anything but showing up, being reliable, keeping the promises he made. But as he pulled into his driveway, Frank realized that for the first time in years, he was thinking about more than just getting through each day. He was thinking about next week, next month, next year, and about the little girl with serious eyes who had, with one simple question, changed the direction of his life. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents clutched programs and smartphones, whispering to each other as they found their seats. Jack checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. "They'll be here," Lily assured him, peeking out from behind the stage curtain. At 9 years old, she had developed an uncanny ability to read his thoughts. "I know," he replied, adjusting the collar of her costume. "How are you feeling? Nervous?" She considered this seriously, the way she considered everything. "A little, but good nervous, like butterflies that aren't trying to escape." Jack smiled. Nearly a year had passed since the father-daughter dance, a year of gradual but profound changes in both their lives. What had begun as Saturday visits had expanded to include school pickups, homework help, and Sunday dinners. He had learned to style Lily's hair, though Miss Betty still handled the more complex styles, mastered the art of proper lunch packing, and accumulated a growing collection of children's books for bedtime reading. "You're going to be great," he told her, just like in rehearsal. Her answering smile still had the power to undo him completely. A commotion at the auditorium entrance drew his attention. A teenage boy was helping an older woman navigate the center aisle, one arm carefully supporting her elbow as she walked with a cane. "They're here," Lily exclaimed, waving excitedly. Jack's son, Chris, caught sight of them and raised a hand in greeting. Beside him, Ms. Betty moved slowly but steadily. Her health improved since starting her new treatment, but still fragile. When they reached the stage, Lily rushed to hug them both. You made it. Wouldn't miss it for anything, sweetheart. Ms. Betty said, patting her granddaughter's cheek. You look beautiful. Chris, now 17 and visiting for the weekend, offered Lily a fist bump. Break a leg, squirt. Their relationship had developed slowly over the past 6 months. At first, Chris had been wary, perhaps seeing Lily as a replacement in his father's affections. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, that wariness had given way to a protective older brother attitude that delighted Lily and relieved Jack more than he could express. We saved seats in the front row, Jack told them. Better hurry before the rush. As they moved toward their seats, Ms. Betty paused to squeeze Jack's hand. Thank you for getting him here, she said quietly, nodding toward Chris. Jack shook his head. He wanted to come. Said he wouldn't miss his almost sister's big debut. The words hung in the air between them. Almost sister. A recognition of the unspoken conversation they had been circling for months. The adoption paperwork sat half completed on Jack's desk at home, waiting for the right moment, for all of them to be ready for what it would mean. The lights dimmed, signaling 5 minutes until showtime. Jack gave Lily a quick hug. Remember, middle of the stage has the best lighting. I know, she replied with the good-natured exasperation of a child who has heard the same advice multiple times. Go sit down before you embarrass me. Jack laughed and joined Ms. Betty and Chris in the front row, his heart so full it felt like it might overflow. A year ago, he would never have imagined sitting here, part of this unusual but devoted family. The show was a spring music performance with each grade performing songs about growth and renewal. When Lily's class took the stage, Jack found himself holding his breath. She stood in the second row, her face serious with concentration as the music began. For a moment, he was transported back to that first day at the community center. The quiet girl coloring alone by the window, her watchful eyes taking in everything around her. How far they had both come since then. Lily's voice joined the others, clear and confident. As they reached the chorus, her eyes found Jack in the audience, and her serious expression bloomed into a smile that carried all the warmth of newfound belonging. After the performance, they celebrated with ice cream at Lily's favorite diner. Chris entertained her with stories from his debate team, while Ms. Betty looked on with contentment, occasionally reaching over to straighten Lily's collar or smooth her hair, small gestures of a grandmother's enduring love. Did you see when Teresa forgot the words? Lily asked, gesturing with her spoon. I whispered them to her so she wouldn't get scared. That was kind of you, Jack said. Lily shrugged. Ms. Parker says we should help each other when we're scared, like how you fixed my bike when the chain broke even though you were busy. Jack exchanged a glance with Ms. Betty, both of them recognizing the simple wisdom in her words. It had become their unspoken philosophy over the past year, this commitment to helping each other through the scary parts of life. Later that evening, as Jack helped tuck Lily into bed at Ms. Betty's apartment, now a regular part of their routine, she grew quiet, her expression thoughtful. What's on your mind, kiddo? He asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. She picked at a loose thread on her blanket. I have a question. Shoot. Remember when I asked if you would be my dad? Just for the dance? Jack nodded, his throat suddenly tight. Well, she continued slowly. I was wondering if maybe you could be my dad for real, not just for special occasions. The simplicity of the question belied its profound weight. Jack had been preparing for this conversation, thinking carefully about how to broach the subject of adoption without pressuring her. But here she was once again taking the lead with her straightforward courage. I would like that very much, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. But it's a big decision. We'd need to talk about it with your grandmother and with Chris, and make sure everyone feels good about it. Lily nodded solemnly. I already asked Grandma. She said it was up to you and me, but that she thought it was a good idea. And Chris said as long as I don't touch his video games without permission, he's okay with it. Jack laughed, not entirely surprised that she had already laid the groundwork. Sounds like you've done your homework. So, she prompted, when he didn't immediately continue. Jack took her small hand in his. Nothing would make me prouder than to be your dad, For real. For always. Her smile was like sunrise after a long night. Good, she said simply. Then with the practical nature that never failed to amaze him, will I have to change my name at school? We can figure all that out together, he assured her. There's no rush. As she drifted off to sleep, Jack remained sitting beside her, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. He thought about the winding path that had led them here, from broken marriages and lost loved ones, from loneliness and uncertainty, to this new family they were building together. In the living room, he found Ms. Betty working on a crossword puzzle while Chris scrolled through his phone nearby. She asleep? Ms. Betty asked. Jack nodded. She told me about your conversations, about adoption. Ms. Betty set down her pencil. I hope that's all right. She's been thinking about it for months. It's more than all right, Jack assured her. I just wish I'd been brave enough to bring it up first. You've been exactly what she needed, Ms. Betty said softly. What we both needed. From the couch, Chris looked up. So I'm officially getting a little sister? If everyone's on board, Jack replied, studying his son's face for any signs of resentment or hesitation. But Chris just smiled. Cool. She's not bad for a kid. The casual acceptance in his voice meant more to Jack than any enthusiastic endorsement could have. Later that night, driving home with Chris asleep in the passenger seat, Jack reflected on the strange, beautiful journey of the past year. He thought of that moment in the community center when a little girl had looked up at him and asked a question that would change everything. Mister, would you be my dad? He hadn't known then what answering yes would mean. The school concerts and parent-teacher conferences, the bedtime stories and skinned knees, the gradual painstaking earning of trust from a child who had already lost. Too much. But as he pulled into his driveway, the one with a bicycle now leaning against the garage and colorful chalk drawings decorating the sidewalk, Jack realized that his answer would always have been the same. Because sometimes the most important questions in life come from unexpected sources, and the courage to ask them is matched only by the courage to say yes. Inside, the adoption paperwork waited on his desk. Tomorrow, they would begin filling it, out together, all four of them. This mismatched, perfect family they were creating one day at a time. For now, though, Jack simply carried his sleeping son inside, grateful for second chances and new beginnings, and for the words of a little girl that had touched a grown man's heart.